Okay. All right, you should be the host now.
Okay. Can you see the screen?
Yep.
All right. What's the best way for me to go through this? I'm not sure how much folks know about the whole background of the parking planning process. Should I just start from the beginning and then go into what the plan is, or you just want me to start with the plan and we can just talk about it?
Can you give like a thumbnail sketch of what brought you to the plan, and then so you don't have to do a whole long thing, but then I think what's being proposed is what people are interested in.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So quick high level overview. So starting back in 2021, we were approached by the Main Streets organization and the Rosendale Business Group, and Concerned Citizens of Rosendale was the group at the time. And they essentially said there's issues with parking, safety and then safety, pedestrian and traffic safety, cars driving around. And so at that time, we met with folks a couple of times. We came out and we walked around, and then we ended up doing a parking study. So quick overview, what a parking study is essentially it's going and taking an inventory of what the current parking regulations are. And then over a period of 10 hours for 2 days, we walk through and we record the vehicles that are parked. And then from that, we get the percentage of occupancy. So how many vehicles are parked along one curb versus the amount of parking that's available. And then we also get an understanding of how long a vehicle is parked for. And we did that using a software program called Cord, which is essentially done through an app. And the data, like we didn't know which cars they were. We just recorded the last 3 digits of a license plate, and that's how we determined how long a car was there. So from that data, what it told us really quickly was that, I wish this thing would go away. There we go. What it told us really quickly was that occupancy was fairly, where we go. So occupancy was fairly high and this is all the streets within the study that we studied. This is Saturday, and so occupancy was fairly high, particularly from the morning times to about 1. And this lines up with the farmers market. It was a beautiful day, a lot of people out. So that kind of lines up with that. And in general, the occupancy remained about the target area. So what you're seeing here is this is the number of parking spaces total. And then this green line is what the target range is. Excuse me. And what we mean by target range is typically we're looking between like 70 and 85% occupancy, with the idea that there's always going to be a parking space available then for someone to use. So you don't have people circling and things like that. And then on winds, and then we also found we did length of stay. And so this sort of shows us that vehicles that arrive early in the morning that are there when we started our count are staying on average of 5 hours, and it sort of goes down from there based on when they first arrive into the study. And we were able to look at where actually within the neighborhood vehicles were parking for a long period of time. And so, these streets out here, Robert Street, Belgrade Avenue, vehicles were parked for 7+ hours. And then Cummins down here, which you might be more interested in, vehicles were parked for an average of about 5.5 hours. And so looking at Wednesday, we really saw peaks right around noon, which is probably lunchtime traffic, and then really down here around 3 and 4, which was honestly probably related to school pickup.
Yeah.
Because there was, a lot of vehicles coming in and that, but also still generally fairly high occupancy. And then length of stay, sort of similar to what we saw Saturday, vehicles that are there early in the morning and average about 5 hours, 20 minutes, and then goes down from there. And all of this is available on the website if anyone wants to go and look at it later.
It's also, is it also in the plan that was sent by you and Enrique Pepin?
It is not in that plan. That plan's sort of like, but we do have a document. So we have a report for the study, report for the business survey, and then the plan. So you can
Okay.
kind of like put them together as one big document. And so this looks at, again, on Wednesday, the length of stay. And what's interesting about this is that on Saturday, pretty much all the parking is unrestricted. There's no time limits. On Wednesday, there are time limits of 2 hours on most streets, though not on Belgrade, not on Robert. There are time restrictions on Cummings, and we still saw people parking for quite long periods of time,
Uh-huh.
certainly beyond the 2 hour parking time limit. And one of the ones that's pretty, troublesome is right here on Cornish Street, which is a very busy, high demand commercial area, but we still saw cars on average parking about 3.5 hours, which was longer than the 2 hour time limit.
Mhm.
And so just real quick on the lot, so we looked at off-street parking with the understanding that these parking lots are privately owned and you're only going to be parking there if you're going to these businesses. So they're not open for general public parking, but we wanted to understand what the parking utilization was like. And then these ones highlighted in yellow are general public parking. Of course, you have to pay to park in the MBTA lots, but you do not have to pay to park in the municipal lot. And so you can see overall on Saturday what the overall occupancy was, about 89% for the lot, a lot of availability in the commuter lot. And then again on Wednesday, what's going on? Wednesday, about 68% overall and a good amount of availability in the commuter lot. I think in general, there was pretty much always available parking on during the weekday in the municipal lot. And this was at a time when the COVID tent was still up. So I think there was like 20 or so parking spaces occupied by that. So the number of spaces available was much lower than where we are now. I think that's a good overview of the study. And so this is the report I mentioned. I can certainly send this out to everyone. It has a lot more detail, probably more detail than you want. But if you had any questions about the data, that's all in there.
That would be
And-
great. That would be great if you could send that link for that report.
Sure. And then what we did is we followed up the survey with we followed up the study with a business survey. And so again, this is that report. This might be way too small for you to actually see on your screen, but all I'm just going to do here is highlight that. So we sent out a survey to 3 different type of respondents: an employer or a business owner within the square, and we were targeting people that live within this study area, which was everything along here, sort of highlighted. Like this is basically the route we walked when we were doing the study. So employers and business owners, people who worked for an employer or business owner, so employees, and then also commercial property owners. Majority of respondents we got were employers and business owners were the most responses. And we didn't want to call out who the businesses were. We've actually since sort of de-identified the data, so you can't go back and say this is who said what. But this sort of gets you an idea of where the businesses were that responded. Again, a lot of them on Cornish Street, Washington Street between Cornish and Poplar, a good amount there. But the data, if you want to go into it, it's there. And so the summary of this is a lot of information in here, but essentially, what we found is that most respondents said that they were busiest during the daytime, both weekends and weekdays. More than half the respondents said customers spend 1 hour or less at their business, and about a third 30 minutes or less. And then another third was 2 hours or less, and then another third was 2 hours or more. So just to give you a sense there. Most folks said that people arrive to their business by car. So we heard that car parking is important to the businesses. There's support in general for extending the time limit in the municipal lot to 4 hours, installing additional ADA spaces. And there was a slim support of installing parking meters to better manage parking. There was, in general, people didn't want to extend the parking restrictions till 8. And people also said they didn't want to decrease the parking time limit to be less than 2 hours. But when we asked the question in a different way, folks did sort of support the idea of shorter parking times to more align with with the amount of time that people spend within their business. So that's that's the general overview there. You can search through this, but it was the study, this survey that then informed our parking and curb access plan. And along this, we also had we talked with the Rosendale Main Streets group several times. We went and presented the findings to the Rosendale Business Group, and talked with them several times. The concerned citizens of Rosendale, there was a lot of engagement back and forth with them. So beyond just the study and the data pieces, there was a lot of talking and communication going on. And so to the plan itself. And so there is within the plan like a very brief blurbs about the study and then the parking business survey to go in there. And essentially, what we came out of this was that there is, visitors getting to the square by car is important. And so there needs to be places for those cars to park. And the reality is that what we have, the curb space we have, the parking that exists, there's not a lot of room to build any more of it. So it's about better managing what does exist. And so that's where the idea of parking meters, of shorter parking times, the 1 hour parking times, of extending regulations to streets that are currently unregulated, pieces like that would increase the turnover of vehicles. So thinking about those cars that are parking for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours during the daytime, getting them out of there so that more people can use that space. And so in this report, it goes block by block exactly what the current regulation is and what we're proposing, if you haven't had a chance to read the report. And I'm gonna do a map a little bit more interactive, engaging here in a second. But we also explain why we propose certain regulations. And so 15-minute pickup drop-off delivery zones is in response to the data that we received through the business survey, as well as the idea that at least a third of the businesses responded that customers are spending 15 minutes or less in there. And this is really about getting people in and out of their destination quickly. They're not blocking the street. They're running in, picking up food. They're dropping something off at the cleaners. They're going into the bank. Just giving them space to do that activity so they're not blocking longer term parking, and that parking space is available for people that need it. So this is really that quick turnover activity. 1 in 4 hour parking. So we decided not to go with the 2 hour parking because we saw from the data that 2 hours or between 1 and 2 hours was really a small portion of the respondents, about 24%. And so in the core around the main businesses, we wanted to get those cars to turn over more regularly. So it was making that 1 hour parking to get vehicles in and out and create the turnover. And then we also heard that about 22% said people spend 2 hours or more. And so these were like the nail salons, the hairstylists, the services you're going to, or the people that are coming and shopping at many different places. And so we needed some parking that was longer than 2 hours. And so what we ended up doing was proposing the 1 hour parking within the center business area, and then the 4 hour parking sort of on the outskirts, which gives longer term parking up to 4 hours for folks that need to stay a little bit longer. But the idea is that, yes, you're going to have to walk a little bit further from your destination because the outskirts away from businesses is in less demand than the parking that's directly in front of a business. And so we want to get that more higher demand parking turned over more quickly. Excuse me. Parking meters. So the introduction of parking meters is not to get money, out of this area. It's really about increasing that turnover. Again, thinking about the folks that were parking for 3+ hours, and in helping us enforce the regulations that are out there. Enforcing time restricted parking, just straight up 2 hour parking limit with nothing else, is really labor intensive in terms of enforcement officers, because it requires, you know, officers to come through, they mark a vehicle, or they note a vehicle in their handheld, and then they have to come back through within 2 hours and see if the vehicle is still there. It's not very efficient. It doesn't often end up with a lot of tickets being issued. A lot of the tickets that we found, we did pull the data they were issuing out here, were for expired tags, parking, like out in a no stopping area, things like that. There weren't a lot of overtime tickets, even though the data showed us that people were parking well beyond the 2 hour time limit. And so a meter, and also people are willing to take that risk, like, hey, I'm going to park here, jump on the commuter rail, or go to my job, or whatever, taking the risk that I probably won't get a ticket. With the parking meter, when that meter runs out, it's very obvious, and it's much easier for enforcement to give that ticket. So it does encourage that turnover. There's also just the basic cost of having to park in that space, that folks, even if they wanted to come out and keep feeding the meter, you couldn't do it by the app. But if you wanted to come out and keep putting money in the meter, it's going to get not expensive, because I think the rate we're going to end up going with here is probably like $1 an hour, maybe even as low as 50 cents an hour. Because again, we're not about getting money. We're just wanting folks to be invested in the fact that they are using that space and getting them out of there when they don't need it. And so that's where the parking meter piece comes in. It's about making sure that turnover happens and making it easier for enforcement to enforce the policies. Regulating previously unrestricted parking. So we heard overwhelmingly that people wanted us to add more parking spaces. And so how do we add more parking spaces when the land that exists is what exists? And so the way to do that is to take unrestricted parking, which is basically there's just no rules, you can park there according to the general traffic rules and regulations, and we put restrictions on it. And then you are creating more space because you're making those vehicles that are parked there move. So it's either meters, it's 1 hour timing, it's 4 hour timing, and it allows more people to use that space as the vehicles are turning over. And so these were on blocks like Belgrade Avenue. It was mostly Belgrade and Robert Street, I think, were really the biggest areas, but I'll show you in a second in the map. Extending the parking regulations to Saturday. So, I mean, Saturday we saw the occupancy was incredibly high throughout most of the day, and vehicles were parking for long periods of time because there's no restrictions. Why would you move your car if you don't have to? And so it created a lot of congestion, cars driving around, circling, cars stopping in crosswalks to run into the bank. And so just a lot of unsafe behavior. It's a very active square, on Saturdays. So it makes sense to extend that regulation to Saturday to keep it turned over. One thing, again, back to the point that the meters are not about making money. We are going to keep the parking in the municipal parking lot free. And the reason being is that, and it's also, we're going to extend it to 4 hours, creating another opportunity for folks that need to park longer. And the reason being is that we want cars to go directly to a parking spot. We don't want them to be driving the square looking for that parking spot. So if you really need to be right in front of the business you're going to, the meters, the 1 hour timing, ideally will create that open space for you. But if you're not really worried about being right in front of the space, like the business you're going to, you can just head straight for that commuter parking or the municipal parking lot, and it's free parking. It's 4 hours. You can park there for longer term. And so you don't have to worry about the meter spaces, which is why we're still keeping that 4 hours or free. And this is the last piece here, additional ADA or handicap parking spaces. We heard loud and clear that there's not enough spaces for particularly older visitors and residents. And so what we're doing is we're working with the Disabilities Commission to identify spaces within the square near curb cuts and crosswalks with the idea of trying to get one space per block, or within like a, if the blocks are short, within like a combination of the 2 blocks. With that, if there's any questions, otherwise I can jump to this map, which is an interactive map, and we can talk through the specific regulations and where we've proposed them.
So Matt, I would just like to offer, just as a general thing for the people who are on this meeting, we all live on the side streets off Washington. And so we're on Basile, Lindahl, Murray Hill, Bexley, and Firth. And
Okay.
we already see when people can't park on Washington, or can't or don't want to park on Washington or park for Target, they park on our streets. And so one of my concerns is that, I completely understand what you're saying about what, your study found, but I'm concerned that like our streets were not included in this, because I think if you saw the number of people who park on our streets for the business in the square, because we're we're a block away for the most part, I'm a block away from Target. I completely, again, understand the part about the square and how congested that can be. But for a lot of people who are savvy about the area, they don't drive around, they just park on our streets.
Mhm.
And it's an issue for us in general, because there have been some housing things that have come up that we've been told that, parking really isn't an issue. And it's like, okay, have you looked at our streets? And that really, for me in particular, I live on the corner of Bexley and Florence. So I'm kind of, I'm a good long block away. Yeah, that's me right there. There's my car. Yeah. And people, park at Target, people park, they're there all day to go, they jump on the T, which is right up on South and the corner of Firth and Washington. They can get on the T there, and they're regular people who park, people who regularly park there. And again, we all live in the city and we get it, but with this new, I guess when I was looking at the plan, I just thought, where are we in this mix? Because I think, we have a lot of things that go on. The Healy Field is well used, and, thankfully it is, it's great. Kids and families use it, on the weekend all the time. People, the pool is there. We get that there's a lot of activity there, but that our streets are not included in these kinds of reviews and surveys, it's a little disconcerting.
Mhm. Yeah, it's and the point taken and good point. So this was driven by, this request was really driven by the businesses, and it came from, as I said, the Rosendale Village Main Street and the Rosendale Business Group. And so the look that we did here really was focused on the sort of commercial square and solving for that issue of access to businesses and visitors and things like that. Excuse me. Thinking about, so looking at a parking study, the way we would approach a residential neighborhood is really, if we think about, so when we get a request for residential parking permits or like installing new RPP, the way we approach it is we go into the area being requested and we do a study, and we're looking for one, an occupancy of 75 or 70% or higher, meaning that there is the demand on the street for that on-street parking, and it's difficult for people to find it. And then we're also looking at 30% of the vehicles on that street are not registered within the area, meaning they're from outside of the area.
Mm-hmm.
So when that is triggered, then it does qualify an area for being, resident parking permit program area. Something you might want to consider if you're really concerned about spillover from businesses Washington Street, but I know it's not something everyone likes and enjoys. It's another thing you have to do is go out and get a permit for your vehicle. So it's not the most convenient for everyone. But otherwise, what we're doing here is,
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think especially if looking at this, Basile, Murray Hill, and Lindahl really are the streets that are affected by the overflow from the square. Those streets, and I worked at the Sumner for 10 years, so I was in that neighborhood all the time, and it's jammed. And actually, Josh Gold, who's on Basile Street, has his hand up. And Karen, I'll get you next.
Yeah, I had a few things just to add on to what Nita was saying. The street, I mean, a lot of the park, like just like Nina was saying, a lot of the parking from the square comes onto my street, even on Basili Street, even the commercial businesses. I see their trucks park on the street because there's not enough parking. But I had a comment about some of the stuff you mentioned about the municipal parking lot, and about the study in general. It seems like it was really poor timing to do this study during COVID, basically. I mean, the mask mandate was still available, was still up and running in the city. And so we didn't even see the full amount of traffic that was going on at the time. So I think the parking problems are probably worse than even what the study was saying, because more and more people are out and about now than they were then. But secondly, you said that the municipal parking lot seemed to have a lot of open spaces during the day. Um, could maybe just some better signage of that there's free parking available
Yeah.
do that versus all these other things that we're trying to add. That seemed, because there's not a lot of signage in the square that points to the parking. It seems like that would be a great thing if there's open spaces, and that's what the study already shows. That seems like an easy thing to do that might help solve a lot of these issues. But then also there seems to be a serious disconnect between the departments at City Hall. The fact that in the recent years we've lost parking. They've taken parking away. There's parking on Corinth Street, which you mentioned, that it's harder to park on now that they've expanded the bus stops. So you've lost parking there. It's like I don't understand. There's just so many different avenues that the city is making decisions that aren't adding up with some of the studies that they've done. They just approved a building on the corner of the street that added 30 units with requiring zero parking, and we have a parking problem that the city recognizes. So it just doesn't, I don't know, some things just really aren't adding up, and it's causing way more traffic in this square. It's harder to get to work, from work. I don't know. Is there communication between the departments, I guess? And also you had mentioned that the commuter rail, a lot of people don't park in that space, right in the square near the bank. Is that another thing where maybe there's not enough signage that people that can use that are taking the commuter rail, or people that come in and park on some of these side streets and then take commuter rail downtown? What you were saying people do? Is there, I don't know. It seems like there's some things that could be easily added that might make it way more accessible for people, instead of adding some of all these other things. Just those are just some of my thoughts. I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Hi, this is Karen, Karen Payne. Just want to piggyback off of what Josh was just saying. One, about the commuter rail lot. It's used during the week when people catch the commuter rail, go back and forth to work, but there's hardly any usage for it during the weekend. And then if you're saying that the square is busiest on Saturday, why not have lower rates to park or free parking in the commuter rail lot during that time? That would relieve some of the pressure from the side streets. Another thing that Josh brought up, and I was really, really concerned about, is the fact that you are presenting us a plan that was initiated by the business groups in Rosendale Square, who just got on board with having 31 units put up in Rosendale with no parking. So it's not making much sense to me either, Josh, and I'm sure Nina and everybody else, that this is a project that's initiated by our business community that's also saying that, hey, we want people here to walk to our stores and not to have to park. So you have 31 units, probably 50 people, and no cars? I don't think so. The other thing is that every time I go to the health center to use the municipal lot, I cannot find a space. Either I'm parking in Citizens Bank space, or I'm traveling around the square to find a parking space. So I'm not sure why the municipal parking lot seems to have empty spaces when that clinic is fully operational all the time. And I know if you did it during COVID, then people had to come by appointment.
Phrase of flexibility with
so-
accountability.
So that's a question. And then I wanted to know more about the outskirts. What are the outskirts? Are you talking about Basili and Lindau and Murray Hill are the outskirts where people are going to be able to flow over to park from the square? I didn't understand that piece.
No, the outskirts that I'm referring to are like Belgrade Avenue here,
That's not going to
Which is-
happen.
which
That
is
doesn't
currently
happen.
If you could let me answer the question and don't
Go ahead,
interrupt me,
go
I'd
right ahead.
appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Then stop talking, please. So Belgrade Avenue here, which is currently unrestricted parking. We have Robert Street here, which is also currently unrestricted parking. Cummins Highway down through here does have 2-hour parking. This is considered outskirts. And so what I'm thinking about, what we're referring to is this is sort of the central core business area, and the outskirts from that central core business area is what it's referring to.
Well, I can tell you, I live on Murray Hill and I don't monitor everyone's parking, but I do notice cars that do park there that don't live there. And I notice cars that when I wave to people that work in the square, that park on my street for 8 hours, 9 hours a day. And so when you say outskirts, that's what I'm thinking, that's the overflow. And you just explained again what outskirts means. But what I'm saying and what I've experienced is that right now they're using our side streets to park because they can't find parking.
Understand. So and I would just respond to the previous comment. I wouldn't say that we have a parking problem. I would say that we have a people using the parking as it is supposed to be used problem. If you have a parking restriction of 2 hours and you're parking your car for 6 hours, you are not using the parking as it's supposed to be used, and you're breaking down the system of parking within the square, which is what the point of parking meters are, which is what the point of decreasing the hours with which you can park your vehicle. Because there is never going to be enough parking for every single person that wants to come here with their car to park their car for 6, 7, 8 hours a day. So it's really about the space that is available adjacent to where people want to go is creating that parking turnover. And without the vehicles turning over, yeah, there's no parking. That's true.
And Matt, I think what people are saying is that we are also the outskirts. We are the outlying area from the square. And living here, we see there's, when people are circling around, the next thing to do is go down one of the side streets, and we're right off Washington. James, you have your hand up? James DeMar-
Yes. I had a couple points that I wanted to make. One, and it's really echoing what everyone's saying, by you freeing up the spaces in the square, you're just going to drive them into the neighborhoods. I can tell you, I live on Lindau Street, and the amount of cars that come and park on this street, that go to the post office, that go to the square, and also the building that they just built next to my house. They don't have full parking there, and the amount of people who park on Cummins Highway, and now if there's meter parking there, they'll just come and park on my street. So you're driving the cars away from the square, which I guess is what you want to do, but you're just driving them into the neighborhoods. And I would have liked for you to know, to find out, because I know some people who own businesses in the square, and they have said that there are a number of the business owners who actually are filling those spaces on a daily basis and parking there for 8 hours.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be interesting to see how that works with them now that we add these restrictions at the parking in the square.
Yeah, and I would agree. That's what we found as well. It's a lot of the businesses that are parking right in front. So I absolutely, I hear the concern about pushing the parking activity off to the streets here. Has there been interest within the neighborhood for pursuing a resident parking permit?
I think, I don't know about the resident parking permits.
Yes, it has been.
I personally don't know. I don't know what conversation I've had about that, but I think it would be a good idea if doing a parking study around just that specific area. It would make sense to include the few streets that are adjacent there. Now, we're not talking about doing a parking study down in Forest Hills for Rosdale Square, but for, you know, the maybe these 3 or 4 streets on both sides of Cummins nearby, Poplar Street on that side as well. I don't know if anybody here is represented on that side, but you know, it might be, it seems like it would be a good idea to have a study of the actual neighborhood and not just a couple streets right where the commercial area is. I don't know
Sort
if
of
the city, I don't know if the
Orange
city,
Street over to First, like this sort of area here.
yeah, that section that you were, yeah, exactly. Because that's the area that's really also affected by Rosnell Square where people come. I mean, my sister works at the farmer's market. It's great when people come and they park on my street. I don't mind. I like seeing them. I like telling them to go to the farmer's market. It's a great thing. But yeah, I think it's not a really good study unless you do all the other streets that are really affected by Rosendale Square and the businesses there. It's just you won't be able to get the full picture without doing it.
And to go back to what you asked, Matt, about the resident parking thing, I think there have been requests from this neighborhood, and we really represent from Healy Field to Cummins Highway. That's the most of us are from that area. There have been questions about it, but we really haven't gotten a satisfactory answer about what that would entail. And I mean, we even Basile in particular has, and Lindahl have really hard times because the Sumner School is right there. And, you know, there's 90 staff members at the Sumner, and I think there's 15 or 16 parking spaces in their lot. So teachers are, you know, they really, I mean, they park in front of my house, and we all get that. We understand. And the teachers actually lobbied to have some dedicated spaces at the municipal lot in 2017 and 18. We tried to get the city to let them have dedicated space there, but that was refused. But so what would be entailed though with getting resident parking stickers?
Yeah, so it would be the program's been on hold for a while it sort of got rethought of how it would be applied. Because in the past it's been like Office of Neighborhood Services would initiate it, and if they said they wanted it, it would just happen. So it wasn't done very well. And to your point, there was really no one who was taking responsibility for it, unfortunately. And so we have improved that, and so now it's basically submitting a request for us to look into it, and it's working with your ONS rep. Now I understand Uju has left, and that they're hiring for the position, but it would be working with Enrique. I think his name's Enrique, sorry.
It is.
Yeah, it'd be working with the ONS office to express your interest in it, and then they would support you in putting together the necessary signatures that just show that there is interest within the community. And then we would come out, like I said, do the parking study, look at the occupancy, take the data from license plates, and then run that to find out where people are registered. And then if it met that criteria, we would approve it for RPP.
Alicia?
Linda, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Lynn.
I live on Murray Hill, and a couple of things here. I don't want to see residential parking only. I like to see shoppers using my street. It's a welcoming thing for our town. I've never seen any abuse in our street. I have seen them on other streets where people are pulling their cars into people's driveways and things like that to pick up their kids. But on Murray Hill, I've not seen abuse of parking spaces. There is one issue that I have on Murray Hill about parking, that's at the top of the hill. When people park on both sides, you can only drive one car through at a time. And to me, that's a bigger issue on our street.
You
Is
mean
that right here at Washington?
Lindahl to,
No, Murray Hill, right on the top of Murray Hill.
from Lindahl to Florence?
Right.
Oh, okay.
It becomes a one lane thing. And I've seen people having to back up and getting into fights about who's going to back up first.
Yeah, that's
So I'd very seriously like to see that get addressed.
yeah, and that is something with the slow streets. what we had requested at the Slow Street meetings is that Murray Hill become one way from Florence to Washington. So that you can't turn up, you can't take a right off Lindahl to up Murray Hill. And that was not approved. And because that used to be my walking route home. And I saw people getting in fights there, especially at school dismissal and drop off and dismissal time. So, I mean, that has been brought up. And
Is it one way up here? It looks like it has the,
it's one way from Lindahl to Washington.
oh, interesting. I guess they're trying to create the flow down here option.
Yeah, it's kind of, and the hard part is that even like, and it's one way from Murray Hill going towards Healy Field. It's supposed to be one way going, I'm sorry, from Healy Field
Yeah,
up.
this is one way.
People take a left onto Florence from Murray Hill because of that two-way thing, and they go down, there's probably
The Bexley.
at least 25 cars a day that take that left and go towards Healy Field.
Yes, I think part of that is because the traffic has gotten so bad with some of the light sequence changes that they've made up in Forest Hills, that the traffic gets backed up all the way to Rosendale Square. It took me a half hour yesterday to get from Rosendale Square to Forest Hills because of the amount of traffic. So then people are trying to snake through to skip Rossi Square. And I know, because I've done it multiple times, that so much of it backs up all the way from Forest Hills because they've made it one lane in a bunch of places, and they've got rid of right on reds, and they've changed the light sequences so that you can't turn left at like when you're trying to get on the, I think, what is it, the Arbor Way or whatever it's called. I mean, it's just the traffic has become so bad that people are literally going the wrong way on one way so that they can try to skip some lights. I mean, it's crazy. It's just crazy.
Oh. Yeah, I wonder, so do you know who you worked with on the slow streets? Was it Hannah?
Yes.
Is she the one? Hannah, yeah. And you had requested it, and she said no, it couldn't happen.
But we requested, and they are going to do a number of things that, to curb speeding. There's going to be speed humps put in and some reduced, some sidewalks are going to be expanded to make, kind of a narrowing so people can't speed through. But that thing in particular, they said would not happen because of they thought it was because the school, if I'm remembering correctly, that the school traffic would prohibit, the thing with the buses would prohibit that. When we had a meeting in 2017 about traffic, what the police officers who were there said that they thought that Lindahl should be made one way going from Murray Hill.
That's what I was about to recommend, because then that way you're filtering everyone out to Cummins Highway.
Yep.
Like they go down Basil and they go to Cummins, they come up here, they can go to Cummins or Washington.
But still, that little chunk there of Murray Hill really has to be, it doesn't make sense to have it be two ways. I mean, so their suggestion was to make Murray Hill one way all the way, Lindahl from Murray Hill into Cummins one way.
Mm-hmm.
And that was not approved by Slow Streets.
Yeah, because I could see people coming down here and being like, I'm going to cut through now or something. Yeah. No, I mean, that's something I can bring back up and find out why. Because to your point about people parking in the neighborhood, is if or even cutting through, is if you make it so that it's not convenient to either get in or to cut through, and that'll cut back on that activity. So I mean, so the things that I've heard is, so I can go back and ask about this section right here, Murray Hill and Lindahl, and why the decision was made not to go with kind of readjusting things.
Mm-hmm.
I can, if you want me to kind of work with you or let Enrique know that there's an interest in RPP and starting that process, we could do that as well. those are sort of two action items I've heard so far that we could follow up on.
Well, and Lynn, I completely appreciate your saying that, you know, the welcoming atmosphere of allowing people to park on the street. And I think maybe if there's some residential parking in some area, usually like in JP, they only have residential parking permits on one side. So the other side is still open and, you know, people are allowed to park there.
It's also possible you can do resident permit parking in the evenings. I think Mission Hill has some areas like that where resident permit parking doesn't start until 6 or 7 or 8. So yeah, I mean, we that's something that I don't know. Maybe we can figure out at another point if we get further down that
Yep.
the permit parking rabbit hole.
Yeah, there's like a small section of permit parking right here. So these folks back here have RPP. I don't recall what the timing is, but so there is some in the area.
Yeah, and there, I mean, and there's some on
Up here.
yeah, on off south and I think around there's some there's somebody that it just says iPad and you've had your hand up.
That's me, Nina. It's Roseanne.
Oh, okay. Go ahead, Roseanne.
No, it was when you were talking about Murray Hill and how they park on both sides of the street. I thought one of the suggestions from Calm Streets was to have no parking on one side and just have parking on one side. And the other thing I wanted to comment about Murray Hill at the top of Washington Street, coming onto Washington Street and trying to take a left towards the square. When a car is parked on that corner, you cannot see.
Yeah.
You can,
And
yeah,
that
right there.
that came
And
up with those streets. And I think there is going to be something, they're going to adjust that, Roseanne.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. And the other thing about making Lindahl a one-way the other way, when the buses come down the street and make the turns, there's 2 driveways at the end of Basile Street that really help the buses make that turn. If they were turning the other way, I don't think it would be as easy for them. Yeah, there's driveways there that people don't park. Well, they park there anyway, they're not supposed to. They always block the driveways, but I think the buses make nice wide turns in the driveways where the driveways are, no one is parking and it helps them make the turn. And when the buses snag at that point, it's because people have parked in front of driveways.
Yes, yes. And
So
and I've seen that, Roseanne, too, you know, if they're going to Lindahl up or down Murray Hill, it's the same.
it happens at the corner of Lindahl and Murray Hill also. Yeah, when they park on the corners like that, they can't make the turns, which I think is where Calm Streets, is that what it is? It's coming in. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just want to say that I'm not in favor of putting parking meters on the side streets. I really, I mean, I think that's going too far, starting to do something like that. And the other thing was, you had already mentioned about the parking meters being 1 hour instead of 2 hours. And the merchants are supposedly in favor of that, but I don't know if it's enough time either because of the hairdressers or the nails, or, you know, if they do have another meeting for facials or whatever's going on up there. I don't know if 1 hour is enough. There are signs for 2 hours already. And the thing is you have to enforce it. And is anyone enforcing the 2 hour signs now? And I think you know, how are you going to enforce it?
Yeah, it's
I think that's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's really, you know, I just think it's a lot. I think 1 hour isn't enough, to be
In
honest
terms
with
of
you.
the side street, so we're trying to add some ADA parking and we don't want to put it on Washington just because there is, you know, with the bus lanes, there's no parking 5 to 10.
No, I understand that, Matt, but the other thing too is people that need handicap parking are not going to see the handicap parking on the side streets. They're not going to see it. And I don't think if someone has to go up the square, they're going to park on Murray Hill if they're handicapped.
Okay.
I think
Fair
it's just too far. So I think the meters and the handicap parking, it's just too much. I don't think it's called for. It's not necessary.
Okay.
And the other thing too is the parking meters, if they have a handicap placard, they don't have to pay. You know, so they could stay as long as they wanted to. And be closer to where they have to get to. That's it. I don't want to take away from the teachers parking on the streets either. You know, I really don't want to see them have to. They have enough issues with their parking, coming in and teaching and what have you. So I really wouldn't want to hurt them from grabbing a parking spot. You know, and even the health center. We have workers from the health center too that park on the street all day. You know, so you really don't want to hurt them from parking. But particularly the meters on the side street, I think are pushing it.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think that's a really good point. Because, you know, to that point, it sort of invites the idea that these residential streets are for parking related to the businesses, which is not what we're at.
Which is not what it's for.
Yeah.
And like,
exactly.
I think Josh said, someone said, we're getting a 31 unit apartment building at the corner of the street. So, I mean, there will be cars. Even the developer is supposedly looking for 20 parking spots that are, you know, but there's not a parking problem. So, needless to say.
It's getting a little late for me. So Matt, I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. And the email address that I have is the one where we can contact you.
Yeah, so I think you have my matthew.warfield@boston.gov.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you can contact me there. I'm happy to, you know, if folks want to have, you know, one-on-one meeting to continue to talk things, or even if you want me to talk to the group again, or a time where we don't have my schedule and technical difficulties where folks can join. Because I mean, this feedback is very valuable. It's, you know, very good point taken about this being driven by businesses and sort of the residential streets that are impacted being left out. But I think what that means now is like, is what can we do to include this area here, and what are some things we can do to help mitigate impacts that might happen from spillover?
Well, and I just, a couple of people in the chat mentioned, you know, I think, you know, when we had meetings at the community center in 2017 and 18, the big concern for most of the people who live in the area is, where are the teachers going to park? Not that they should not park on my street, but where are they going to park? And that really, you know, that in general is kind, you know, it's been a hard thing in this neighborhood for years. And you know, they've done some things to alleviate things at drop off and pickup time, but like I said, you know, teachers park on our street and we're, you know, 3 blocks away, which is, and it's fine. I don't have an issue with that, but I think something, you know, could be done to address that issue in general. But and so people from that neighborhood, thank you for coming, and we can reconvene. We can, you know, talk about this. And Matt, thank you for saying that, you know, if we wanted to re-meet, that would be, you know, a possibility. And so maybe we toss some questions around. And also, you have his email address, and I'll send it to you again, but you have it because I sent you I forwarded you the, let's just call it the bad Google Meet link. So you have his information there. And so, you know, you can reach out to him yourself too. So thank you a lot for this time, and thank you people for showing up.
And if you wanted to come to an in-person meeting, I am presenting, I don't know if it's an exclusive group, but I'm presenting tomorrow at 6 at the Work Hub station downstairs. It's I think Walk Up Rosendale is the one that's sorting that. And then I'm presenting next Tuesday at Square Root, which is the Main Streets group, which I'm not sure if that's exclusive either, but those are 2 in-person events that are currently scheduled, if anyone wants more information about that.
Okay.
you.
All right, thank you. Karen, did you have one last thing? Did you had your hand up again?
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize and what the people are saying in the chat is that, you know, we really would like to make sure that the teachers have a parking. And if we're looking at residential parking, is there some way that teachers could be identified if they're parking and they're not part of Rosendale, if we go that route? Because if we do that, if we do residential parking, that would then exclude some of our teachers from being able to park on the side streets when they have to, when they're in school. So, but so I just wanted to emphasize that we do care about our teachers and we really don't want to be kicking them out of the spaces that they do occupy now. And if we go a different route, that we keep them in mind that that we would still want them to be able to park during school hours to do their job for our kids.
Yeah, I think the teachers, and also I'm just looking through this, through the chat too, is that, you know, the people who work at the medical center have issues with parking, and the small business owners, and in particular Lena, who is at the corner of Washington and Basile, she does get ticketed a few times a week, just trying, you know, and she owns the business, so it's hard for her to manage that. I'm going to wrap this up, folks.
Thank you very much for having it.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Thank you
Everybody.
for your time,
Thank
Matthew.
you. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. I'm going to try to grab, I just got one last comment I'm trying to copy here. So, all right, I'm good. Thank you.
You got them? Because I can copy if you want.
Yeah, I got them all. I
right.
grabbed them. I got them
All right, great.
all. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.